This is Joe Zarzaur. I have Dr. Malone, who's an internal medicine physician that works with the firm. We're here for another segment of Zarzaur Law TV. Today we're going to do an update of a previous segment. We're going to talk about car wrecks, basically. What does it mean to be in a car wreck in Florida? What happens? First of all, Florida is a no-fault car insurance state. Here's what that means, basically. Everybody that's involved in a wreck, even the person that ran the stop sign or was drunk and ran a red light, they are actually entitled to insurance from their own policy. And you as a victim, you're entitled, the first part of your insurance proceeds from a car wreck actually come from your own policy. And those are called personal injury protection benefits. And when you take out a car policy in Florida, you're required to purchase two components: personal injury protection up to $10,000 and property damage for somebody else up to $10,000. You're also required to have these coverages on every car that's operable in the state. So it's important, even if you have a car that you don't drive, you have to have those two coverages. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means this. The legislature decided, with some consultation with the insurance companies, that this would save money for the insurance companies in the long run, so they had enough lobbyists to pass the law. And here's what it means. If you're in a wreck, the first up to $10,000 in medical expenses is paid by your own car insurance policy. So when you go to the hospital for the ER visit, they're going to want to know what your car insurance is, because that's where they're getting paid. They're getting paid straight from your auto carrier. And the person that caused the wreck, if they were drunk, if they ran a stop sign, I don't care what it was, if they had their eyes closed and they were texting the whole time, their insurance policy from their car will actually pay their first up to $10,000 in medical benefits. So many people say, well, when I go to the ER and then I leave the ER, they say everything's okay. I get a note that says you're discharged and you have strain, back strain, neck strain. What does that mean? Does that mean that I'm done? Well, the way the law works is this. In order for you to have a case beyond the personal injury benefits, protection benefits, you have to prove in Florida that you have a permanent injury. So many people get the ER discharge papers that say they have a strain, and they say, well, I guess I'm okay. I don't have a major problem, therefore, it doesn't sound like I do, therefore I must not need a lawyer. That is not the case. 95% of the cases that I work on have clean bill of health documents from the ER. In other words, it says you just have sprain, strain, whiplash, whatever. Well, what the ER does, and I'll get Dr. Malone to talk about this in a second, the ER is not in the business of diagnosing permanent injuries. They are in the business of diagnosing injuries that can kill you in 48 hours. If you don't have one of those, and the tests they use to run that are usually x-rays to prove fractures and internal injuries, and CT scans that are looking for bleeds or other structural abnormalities within the body. What they're not running, and what's important, they're not performing an MRI test. They're not doing extensive clinical exams on your back, your spine, outside of making sure that you don't have an acute nerve injury. So what happens most of the time with my clients is they're discharged from the ER with a strain or whiplash or something like that. They continue to have problems. They continue to treat with their primary doctor. They're eventually sent to an orthopedic doctor. They get an MRI eventually, months, sometimes weeks or months after the wreck. And the MRI shows not only a serious problem in their neck, back, or low back, but something that sometimes is surgical in nature. And they left the ER and they look at me and they say, how can the ER doctor say that I'm fine and I have a surgical problem that has to be done on my back and I'm going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses and a permanent injury? And Dr. Malone can talk about that in a second, but the reason is the ER doctor is not in the business of diagnosing all your injuries, just those that could kill you in 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing I will say that was passed last year, the $10,000 in PIP benefits is not automatically available to every person that's injured in a car wreck anymore. Now the insurance industry has passed an additional hurdle. In order to get the full 10 grand, a doctor within 2 weeks of the wreck has to say you have an emergent medical condition. If they don't say that, if you don't get that diagnosis, and most people don't, within the first 2 weeks, then you have only $2,500 in PIP benefits available out of the 10 that you purchased. So that's important because the ER is going to eat up a lot of that $2,500, and the ambulance ride is going to eat up a lot of the $2,500 that you initially have. And then you have to talk to a lawyer or figure out that your health insurance is going to pick up the rest, or if you don't have health insurance, unfortunately, you're going to have to pay the rest out of your pocket. So, and that's a problem because in order to show you have a permanent injury, if you continue to have symptoms, you have to continue treating, and that's going to cost money. So it's really a hard situation to navigate on your own. I wanted Dr. Malone to talk a little bit about why it is that the ER doctor doesn't diagnose all of your injuries after a wreck. They're just, why is that the case?
Well, and without researching all the exact numbers, very few people actually admitted to a hospital following something like a motor vehicle accident, unless, of course, it was, I'm talking serious trauma where there's bone sticking out, people are unconscious, massive blood loss, things like that. But if it's, you were restrained in your car, airbags deployed, things like that, and you're conscious when you go in there, many times there's no need to keep you in the hospital. But like Joe had mentioned, it's to look for any acute trauma, acute instability, things as such. And then the physician will look at your old records, compare, say, oh yeah, these labs are consistent with their baseline labs, we're not doing a whole lot here. That's not to say that you don't have a problem, it's just not one that requires acute hospitalization. And it's just not practical to do MRIs and such in the hospital, in the emergency room setting, due to turnaround time and
expense.
Yeah. So doing these plain films, doing the CT scans, non-contrasted CT scans, that is what is most high yield for the expense that's involved in the time that these physicians have. So you still may have a nerve tear, some inflammation, you can still have slipped disc, things like that, where, hey, it's going to impact you. You're going to feel horrible a week later, a month later, or whatever. But at the time in the ER on day one, it did not warrant hospitalization, and that hospitalization probably would not have changed your outcome immediately, unless, of course, there was an acute neurologic deficit, like Joe had mentioned.
Like a nerve injury or a disc injury that they would need to operate on immediately. Mm-hmm. What you're going to experience, though, afterwards is symptoms related to disc injury or radiculopathy, numbness, tingling, pain that radiates from one part of your body to another part of your body, which is the radiculopathy that I was talking about. Those kind of symptoms that emanate from the center of your body, the spine, and go out to your limbs or your neck or your back or your buttocks or your legs. Those are the kind of symptoms that your doctors, your primary care doctors, are going to treat you for, first conservatively with like physical therapy and things like, and medicines, in hopes that whatever disc injury was an acute injury that will go away. And if it doesn't, it could be a permanent situation that needs to be dealt with. That's where it's important that you obviously get the right treatment. We at the firm, what we do first is we take the case in, we get all this medical history, and then we sort of help you through the medical process. In other words, we make sure you get to the right doctors to get diagnosed quickly. It is a proven fact that the quicker you're diagnosed in a legal setting, the more justly you're going to be compensated. And the inverse is also true. If you don't get properly diagnosed for a couple of years, it's likely you're going to settle your case with some lawyer, not me, but settle your case with some lawyer that's going to just want to churn the file. And then you're going to end up 2 years later with a serious disc injury or something that requires surgery, and you've already settled your case and released the person that hit you. So what's important is to be diagnosed medically, obviously for obvious reasons, your health reasons first, but it's also from a legal standpoint, it's very important that the lawyer that's working on your case, hopefully it's a board-certified civil trial lawyer, that lawyer is making sure that before they value your case, before they say we're ready to do something with the insurance company and do a demand, before they value your case, you have reached a point where somebody has looked at your spine, if you're still having the symptoms, through an MRI, and has said, it's okay, there's no structural damage, and you don't have a disc abnormality, or they have diagnosed one. So that's something that I'm never comfortable telling a client to settle a case if they're having symptoms until we have that. So that's how PIP law works in Florida. Once you do prove a permanent injury in Florida, you can get over and above the $10,000, depending on what the policy limits are for the other side. But that permanent injury threshold is real in Florida. It's one of those things that has to be dealt with in a very professional manner, because if you mess around with your medical treatment at first and you don't get the right treatment, the insurance companies have a built-in defense, and which is, oh, you didn't go get medical care right away. You did all this other stuff. You were still playing sports and you were still doing this. Therefore, your back injury must have been related to something other than the wreck. So it's really important from our perspective, from a trial lawyer's perspective, that you get the right treatment, you get it quickly, and everything is documented so that you don't give the other side the ability to say something else caused it. Dr. Malone, when your case does progress to the point to where you have a serious injury, Dr. Malone consults with us here at the firm to explain not only to the client what that means through me, but also to help us do the presentations that we need at trial and at mediations and at settlement conferences to make sure that the prognosis that your doctor gives you sounds reasonable. Sometimes we get that, but where it's not, and we have to send them to other doctors. But in any event, if you have questions about personal injury protection, car wrecks in Florida, anything associated with injury cases in Florida, especially motor vehicle accidents, you can find us on the web at zarzaurlaw.com. You can get us by the phone, of course, at 855-HIRE-JOE. But there's other YouTube videos that deal with this particular topic that Dr. Malone and I have done in the past. I just wanted to give you this update, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions about it. Thank you.